Welcome back to another AI Journal LinkedIn Live. Great to be with you today, wherever you are in the world. And today I'm joined by an amazing guest, Candid West. Candid, it's great to have you on the show. How are you doing today, sir?
Hey there, Tom. Thanks for having me. I'm excellent, and I'm really, really excited to talk about all the good things about cyber protection. So thanks for having me again.
Yeah, I'm really excited for this episode because Rachel, who set this up, who very kindly set this up, it's an area that's very key to what I'm involved in and what I just have a personal interest, cybersecurity, all the amounts of increased data and what's going around the world and how it can be used in all these different paths. It really does blow my mind, Candid, on what we can do with it, how we can learn from it, and how it can make it safer, better, and all those different kind of things. But before we jump into a few questions I've got around cybersecurity today, and quickly to any of the audience, if you have questions for Candid or on this topic, we'll try and answer them on this session, or if not, afterwards. But Candid, if you could just give us a bit of an overview of who you are, what's your story, what's you've been involved in, and what's led you to where you are at the moment with Acronis.
Yeah, happy to do so. I would say I'm your classical geek nerd. I'm not offended by that. I was born when the first Star Wars movie appeared. Well, now it's the fourth episode, of course, but dating me a little bit there. Named New Hope, right? So that was definitely kind of an ominous thing to go for. Been kind of growing up with your classical Commodore 64, playing games, but of course also wanted to know how is it actually working, kind of what's behind it. So I was always curious to find out more about those electronics and all the different things. And yes, then growing up with your dial-up modem, making the funny noise, using up the phone line when other family members wanted to use it. So all the good stuff. And then, yes, I joined IBM Research Lab in Zurich, Switzerland, where I was born, kind of going after cybersecurity. After that, I joined Symantec, and for about 17 years, I was building up their global security response lab. So again, kind of a day-to-day basis, fighting the cyber risks and threats out there, from computer viruses to those classical Stuxnet and other targeted attacks that nowadays come up more and more. And since about 2.5 years, I joined Acronis. It's a Singaporean Swiss company, and I'm here in the Switzerland office, basically going after cyber protection. We can talk about more like that because it's cybersecurity and data protection merged together. Because nowadays, you've said it, we all depend on so much things out there that there's a lot of things that you should do to actually keep your digital life safe. Otherwise, yeah, you might have more than just a bad weekend. But that kind of keeps me happy and busy for the whole days, sometimes weekends as well. But that's the good and the bad. When your hobby is also your job, there's never going to be a boring hour.
Yeah, that's the best part as well, isn't it? When you've got something like you do, Candid, that's also your hobby and an interest that you don't really track the hours. You really just have a passion for helping. And the thing I like about cybersecurity, in his personal opinion, is keeping people safe, and it's keeping people's sensitive data safe. Because if you can look at someone's data, you can get a very good picture of who they are, what their spending habits are, where they go, what they're involved in, the kind of person. It's incredible. You can build this profile on them. So it's awesome that you're keeping that protected for people. And also, on a very quick side note, Star Wars is a very big topic of mine as well, and it's actually one of the areas where I geek out about. And one of my friends turned to me and they were like, "You're actually a geek, Tom." I was like, "Yeah, I am," and I love it because I love talking about all these high tech situations and really cool topics. But with cyber, so if you look at cybersecurity and how it's affecting the world, Candid, where is it if someone's looking at this from an outside view? So say if someone's not in the area of cyber, or it's something they don't consider. It's very common for companies or people, and if it's not their topic field, to consider all the implications of what cybersecurity can do, even for the benefits, or which what I don't want to look at is the downfall if it's not properly protected. Where's the real competitive advantage, would you say?
So, I mean, many companies, as you say, and also individuals, they don't really think that it will ever apply to them. So that's one of the classical mistakes that we see over and over again, that small companies say, oh, why would an attacker actually go after me? I have nothing to give to them. And the same, of course, with regular people, consumer at home, saying, oh, I don't use online banking, so why would they attack me, right? I'm not interesting for them. But that's the wrong start, because attackers, they sometimes don't really care who they attack. They just want to make the numbers. So they send out the phishing emails to millions of accounts, don't even knowing who's behind it. They just want someone to click on them. And the same for companies. So they just put out their phishing net, and if some or two have, let's say, unpatched servers in the internet or some exposed services with weak passwords, they will find it, they will get into it. And yes, of course, if you're I don't know, a hairdresser or a kind of a small shop down the road, they might not ask you for 10 million in extortion if it's a ransomware attack, because you most likely cannot afford it, but they might ask you for 50,000. Or even, I have a lot of friends, unfortunately, who had their social media accounts hijacked. So for one of the friends, it was an Instagram account. And I mean, yes, it didn't financially ruin them, but it was really embarrassing because the attacker started posting new things on their Instagram account, right? So now you have to explain to all your friends, oh, that wasn't really me doing that, right? And I should have known better to choose a strong password. So I think that's kind of the first misconception. The second one is, of course, we see all the dependencies, right? Because nowadays, cyber is not just for, looking at nice cat videos and kind of trolling on some YouTube videos, right? Nowadays, many gas stations are actually depending on online. And we've seen that in the US with an attack against Colonial Pipeline, where they have been out for about a week, which led to shortage in some gas stations, right? And there's many of those examples going for payment systems, going for airlines that had to ground flights. So you will actually have a real world impact because someone opened an email that they shouldn't have.
Yeah. It's incredible, isn't it? Because you reminded me of something that's happened recently with me. It's not with me personally, with someone I know on Instagram, and their account got hacked. And it was a few weeks ago, and all of a sudden they started putting payment links up to, say, for Bitcoin or whatever it was, which is a scam, or it was clearly a scam. But that person, girl, had a Instagram taken over, and obviously you have to go set up a new account. And it was all from some sort of form, I think, when I asked, some sort of form where they had to fill in information because it looked legit. And that's catching people out my age. Like, it's still how complex or how legit something can look. Like, I see sometimes emails come from that claims to be Barclays, and it's not Barclays or it's someone. So those kind of points you made is so key and so important to be able to, and as you said, the implications, Candid, of what it can lead to and what it can go to and how it can do it. So maybe if we look at it with the world that we're in today, with new technologies available, AI being one that gets a lot of light at the moment and gets a lot of people talking, automation as well. I mean, automation, no matter, you can have a very simple automation or you can have a very complex series of automations. Where do these technologies, and maybe something else that you're thinking specifically in your head, Candid, where do these technologies come into it with when you're using your services at Acronis, or from a kind of general view with hackers using these kind of services?
Yeah, automation and being efficient is definitely more and more crucial nowadays because the sheer volume of attack. I mean, we see on every given day about 400,000 to 500,000 new malware samples being created. Those are also stats from AV Test Institute in Germany. So that's 500,000 new computer viruses every day. I mean, that's a kind of an avalanche. I mean, I'm in Switzerland, so a lot of snow, right? Avalanche coming your way that you have to fight. If you want to do that manually, well, good luck to you. It's not going to work. You have to automate. You have to use machine learning and AI to go through that, to pick and find the needle in the stack of needles, right? It's not a haystack because all of them might be attacks, but some of them are more serious than others. And you need to go to them quickly because otherwise it's not really any good to you to say, oh, by the way, I detected that yesterday someone stole your credit card. It's already gone, right? You want to ideally have it prevented before going, or at least stop it at the right moment where someone's still deleting your data or stealing your data and information. So it is definitely key that we can help with automation and artificial intelligence to reduce the complexity. Maybe to give another angle there, we've done a survey from Acronis and asked enterprise and organizations, how many security solutions are they running in parallel? And we've seen that 21% responded that they're using more than 10 security solutions in parallel. I mean, just imagine, right? That means that you have 10 consoles, and if you have something in one, you might be copy pasting it to the other. So it's bound to get some human errors and making mistakes, right? Because you think, oh, they're linked together, but they're not. They might not be correlated, or the typical one. The time might not be synchronized, so one might be in GMT, the other one might be your local time, and now you're
Yeah.
messing it up. Those are things which sound very simple, but a
Yeah.
lot of organizations still fail because it's so complex. And let's face it, nobody has enough resources, right? I mean, we're all busy with our day-to-day job. So if you add more and more point solutions, that's not going to help.
Yeah.
And that's, yeah, where AI comes into, hopefully, to the rescue. I mean, of course, it has to be in perspective, right? We're not going to have the kind of the global Terminator AI on our side to help us solve everything. And now we're just back to drinking tea. The
Yeah.
human, the expert is still needed.
Yeah.
So don't worry, your job is still safe.
Yeah.
But it probably will shift, right? That you don't need to go for fighting against the classical brute force password attacks, which are happening on a daily basis. You
Yeah.
want to know the classical ones. So if someone really targeted going after you and
Mm.
probably is already inside your organization's network. So that's the one you want to highlight to the analysts to actually react to it and maybe
Yeah.
even suggest a few things and say, hey, I blocked it. I hope that's fine for you. If you don't want it, change it.
Yeah. Some great points as well. And it's got me thinking as well. I guess I always kind of think, how can you, and machine learning can help with this, and AI can help with this, prioritizing something. So you said a great word, like how much of a priority is it, or what the, or another way of looking at what's the time span on it. If you've had your credit card taken, you only get an alert the next day, as you said, they've had plenty of time to go spend on that card and look at it. But I also think it's an interesting way, because as a consumer, I take it for granted. If some sort of fraud happens to my bank card or business card or whatever it is, I think I want to be known straight away. And if not, I can imagine, and I'm sure a lot of people would agree, you get annoyed very quickly. So I think it's important. Do you have any kind of thinking, Candid, on how it's going to help us prioritize things? Maybe not just in finance, but in healthcare or in education or all these other areas where there's a lot of personal data like being potentially there for the taking.
Yeah, I mean, we see a lot of improvements now, what we call predictive analysis, where AI machine learning is used on lots of data, because we're having more and more data available, and computing power is there as well. So,
Yeah.
for example, on AI ops, so just any data in your network and data center will be analyzed, and then you can say, hey, I predict that probably there will be a data leak in 1 hour from now, or it
Awesome.
seems like you have a few machines failing, so probably you should change that hardware. So, as a
Yeah.
concrete example, at Acronis, we check your hard drive for kind of errors and hard drive issues, and
Yeah.
then we give you a prediction. Say we assume that with 90% accuracy, in 2 days this hard drive will fail. So you better order one new and kind of make sure you have a backup and all of those things. So we try to be preventive, that you don't even have to kind of face the reality that your data has been lost, right? You want to be as quick and early as possible. And that, of course, applies to, as you said, healthcare, finance, logistics,
Yeah.
anywhere where a lot of data happens and where kind of real time is critical.
Yeah, that's awesome as well. Because I was just thinking with logistics as well. There's a big push at the moment. Everyone going towards edge. So like everything taking in house and into your own data stacks, into your own servers and everything. So it's a real interesting way. And I guess looking at it from a ransomware perspective, there's been some horrible examples and some poor examples, and also I'm just thinking with Acronis, it's almost like cybersecurity on demand. It's if you can have that prediction, you can. It's like you can be told. Like there's that Samsung fridge that says when you're going to run out of milk or something and top it up. That's the same. That's the way I was kind of thinking. I know that an attack's likely to happen in the next 2 hours or a big finance. That's very cool to see that you're doing that. But with ransomware, have you got an example you can share with the audience? Maybe one to do with healthcare. I think there was a Irish healthcare system that had a big problem, or maybe in another sector, or just to give the people watching, even live or on a recording, what that situation looks like, Candid.
Yeah, I mean, Irish healthcare system, that has been a predominant topic and example. We've seen, of course, in the US, Colonial Pipeline, already mentioned, JBC meat processing. Closer here in Europe, we've seen MediaMarkt and Saturn, kind of an electric goods in Germany, the Netherlands, kind of shutting down their shops, right? And very often, it's not that the ransomware itself goes directly against the cashier, the point of sale system.
Yeah.
But because it's in the same network and everything is connected, you will no longer be able to actually process it. So they have to shut it down, because you don't have any connections, right? So
Yeah.
at MediaMarkt, for example, you could still go and pay by cash. Just
Yeah.
any vouchers and gift cards were no longer accepted because their internal system could not recognize them.
Yeah.
The same with the pipeline in the US. The gas pipeline was not really affected directly, so the attackers were not on the valves kind of putting it on and off.
Yeah.
Technically possible. We've seen those like Stuxnet.
Yeah.
But here it was more the issue that the billing service did no longer work because it was encrypted. So basically, it would have been gas for free for everyone, and that gives a lot of other issues. So they had to shut it down just to kind of know what's happening. Because
Yeah.
if we go back to the logistic example, right? I've seen a company in Italy
Mm.
where they were impacted by ransomware as well. All the terminals were encrypted, so couldn't really see what's happening. They still had a few trucks already loaded,
Yeah.
but they actually caught them back because they said, if we deliver it, we don't really know now, are we missing those goods or not, right? Because their kind of internal kind of system and balance would no longer be accurate. So
Yeah.
that is kind of the nightmare for any logistics, right? If your depot is kind of out of sync and you have to send lots of manpower in to manually count all the stocks,
Yeah.
nobody wants to do those. So we've definitely seen more and more of those attacks. And going back on how to protect against those, of course, you have to do the classical, as in awareness, that people not click on every email that they get, but there will
Yeah.
always be one clicking on it, right?
Yeah.
Having strong passwords. So I always make the joke that COVID 2020 is not a good password and you should definitely not use it, right? But, we've seen stuff like this, but
Yeah.
then it's never the 100% security. So there is always the chance that something gets through. And
Yeah.
that's where cyber protection software like from Acronis comes into play, because
Yeah.
we actually go after the behavior.
Yeah.
So yes, we also do have signatures, kind of like fingerprint, where we identify known malicious files.
Yeah.
But with 500,000 new malware samples, I mean, just catching up with signature, it's kind of a tedious task, right? So
Yeah.
now we go after the behavior, and we actually have been using that for over 4 years already, where
Yeah.
we can say, hey, when someone is trying to encrypt your files, there's only a few ways on how to do that, right? Because in the end, your files will be encrypted. That's their
Yeah.
end goal. And we can monitor that since we're very low level on the system.
Yeah.
And then we analyze it and say, oh, we see this is something that we don't want to happen. And then we block it. And
Yeah.
anything that has changed, we can revert because we also see a kind of a local cache. So
Yeah.
as a user, you don't have to find some files in your backup and restore them manually. It's all done automatically. And like that, we can block any ransomware, even if you have never seen it before. And I think
Yeah.
that's where we need to go because, as you say, the attacks are definitely increasing in frequency, so it will happen. It's not a
Yeah.
question of if, it's a question of when.
Yeah. That's a really good point as well, because it's so interesting, like the amount of new technology or new ways and new methods, especially things like the metaverse. I'm very interested. I know it's not something I wish, but I'm very interested to see what those kind of cybersecurity attacks look like into a new platform, a new all going through the blockchain and all through whatever VR is going to be held on and the metaverse is going to be held on. And it's a real interesting way, because I always think, as bad as these attacks are, as you're saying, it's likely going to keep happening now and 100 years from now, whatever kind of ways that looks. But at least with those challenges or with those attacks, we can become better and we can be educated and be better prepared for it, and use things like behavior analytics, because you can, again, apply machine learning to that and track the person and or track the kind of types of people that are trying to get through to that piece of software. And I mean, it was Social Dilemma. I mean, that so arguably you might agree with it, you might not, because I know there's a bit of bias on it at certain points. And I remember Mark Zuckerberg, he did an interview recently with Lex Friedman, and anyone watching it, I highly recommend you watch it, because it is an incredible interview, because Lex Friedman is very, very knowledgeable on tech. He's interviewed Elon Musk, and he gets very and interviews like top NASA scientists and can get very deep in the tech route, but also makes it top level. And I think it goes to your point, Candid, about getting too digressed, but it also goes to your point of making sure that we really understand, what it is. And I think that brings me to my next point. I will quickly say hello to everyone, as we've got some great people joining us from around the world. So brilliant to have you all here today with us and with Candid. Ben, always great to see you. And yeah, we'd love to understand what you think, Candid, is the best route then, because people don't understand cybersecurity. People need to become more knowledgeable. As you said, it still catches maybe 1 million people. It'll still catching a dozen, or a 5%, 5% of them that will click through. How important is it that prevention is better than the cure, almost, which is a good saying, I think, to say, and educating people?
It's actually an interesting point that you raised there. Kind of the people should be aware of it. I agree that there needs to be education, and I mean, you're doing a fantastic job here with the podcast, right, to bring out the world. But I'd say for many, at least consumers and maybe small companies, they don't really care too much about which attack it is, right? They just want to be protected.
Yeah.
They don't really care if it's some North Korean attackers going after their data, or if it's a hard drive failure deleting their data. They just want to make sure that they have their data.
Yeah.
So,
or their next door neighbor.
Exactly, or the kid from the next door.
Yeah.
And I agree with that, right? Should they actually need to care? Well, they only want to be secure, which is their right, and they should be secure, but they don't really need to know all the details. Similar to with your car, right? Most of the people don't really know how a car engine works, but they still drive it. They still know the basics. And of course, you add a few security features, seat belt, airbag, brakes. And that's exactly what you should do on the PC side as well, right? Have a multi-layered security to safeguard you against different avenues of attacks.
Yeah.
So that's where I think awareness comes in, because you need to train the people. They should use a strong password, and specifically a unique password on different systems, so that if their social media account gets breached, it's not the same password than they use in their corporation environment, because otherwise the attackers are already in.
Yeah.
But apart from that, yes, we definitely need some technical measurements. And for me, we definitely need a holistic view there. So it has to be kind of a conversion of, as I say, data protection, cybersecurity, and also patch management, manageability.
Yeah.
All in kind of a combined framework or console. Because in the end, you first need to know which systems you have and where your data is. If you don't know about it, how will you protect it, right? Because if it's out of your mind. And then the second one is, yes, you should do as good prevention as you can. So patch those vulnerabilities that Microsoft releases patches, right? I mean, 2 days ago, Microsoft released patches for 71 vulnerabilities. The question is, have you already put them in? You had 48 hours. I know it's not always easy to find the window, because nobody wants to restart systems while people are working. But you have to have a plan to do that, and not just kind of delay it for month and month. You should work with least privileges. Not everyone needs administrative right to install any software that they come across. I know I'm guilty as well of saying, hey, I need it because I want to install that application. But maybe I don't really need it, right? Maybe security is better just to have someone else do it for you. And kind of, if you have all of those, then yes, of course, better detection to behavior-based detection, or the classical machine learning, where you can do static analysis. So for example, we train a kind of a classical tree, classifier tree, with hundreds of millions of samples, which we classified as good and bad. And then we have a very good accuracy to say, oh, if a new sample comes in, but it's 99% similar to that one, it probably is bad as well.
Yeah. Good way of doing it, that you can track all that kind of data, Candid. So it's very cool to see you doing that. And I think I've got great to have someone from Canada joining us as well. And I think I'm really interested on that point, because I am amazed at how much data relates to everything. So when people ask me about AI, I say, well, AI is in everything. Like whether it's in your mobile phone or whatever it is, like it's always around us, even if you don't know what it is. But what do you think then? Maybe if you've got a particular company in your mind, Candid, or maybe industry at large, or maybe it's a small company or a large company, how can they make sense of data? And you touched on a very good point. How can they have it in place, or maybe what's the strategies or the thinking they need to apply, and what you've seen with through your career to make the most of that data, to make them the most secure, and to be able to strategize or have the plans of when to take the systems down and restart it? What do you think?
Yeah, I'd say first is exactly getting the data, right? And we've seen, of course, during the last 2 years with the pandemic, a huge kind of diversion to the cloud, which
Yeah.
is good, finally doing that digital transformation. But now a lot of companies kind of, well, just forget about those log files, which is, of course, very bad. You should
Yeah.
ingest the cloud log files because that's probably where your data is now and where you get user logins. So make sure that you actually ingest all the interesting data where your sensitive data or your customer applications and so on are running.
Yeah.
So getting that. And then, of course, as in the good old saying, garbage in, garbage out, you need to make sure that the data you get is good and of high quality.
Yeah.
If you just try to collect everything, you're probably collecting nothing, as in you're not generating any value of it. So
Yeah.
focus on some use cases that you want to achieve. Let's say you want to figure out insider threats if someone tries to steal your data,
Yeah.
or you want to figure out if someone tries to, I don't know, do brute forcing on some of your web applications and try to go after that first. Don't try to solve everything at once because
Yeah.
you will most likely fail, right? Even if you get some other companies, there are good ones out there. They
Yeah.
always start somewhere and then kind of build up on that.
Yeah.
And for that, yes, of course, you need to get the data somewhere in a data lake or somewhere else where it's easy accessible. But
Yeah.
most of the cloud providers do offer this nowadays, even with good security and privacy features in place.
Yeah.
And then, yes, it's kind of applying the right questions to it that you want to solve. I think that's it. And I see it from our own experience. So Acronis has a long-standing experience with helping sport partnerships.
Yeah.
So we have sports like Formula One, Williams Racing, or Southampton Football Club,
Wow.
where we help them actually getting information, well, stored safely as one, but also analyzing the data.
Yeah.
And it's amazing how much information is gathered for professional soccer players nowadays.
Yeah.
That's down to kind of the information about what have they been eating the day before, how much hours of sleep, what's their heart rate, O2 levels, and then of course how much they're running, left side, right side.
Yeah.
And yes, I mean, if we're talking about millions of millions on the line, you want to make the best decisions, right? And
Yeah.
for that, yeah, having the right data first, making sure it's kind of normalized, classified, right? I mean,
Yeah.
yes, you can do unsupervised learning on unclassified data, but
Yeah.
that's a lot harder, right? So maybe start with classified data, which
Yeah.
is labor intensive, but might yield you the better starting point to go and build up on that.
Yeah, brilliant takeaway. Thank you, Candid. That's a great answer to help our audience. And Formula One, I always look at because it's so data driven. Like the amount of work they do to skim off like half a second or probably even less. It's incredible. You just think that's how tight it is in certain industries or in sports at least. So it's awesome to see you got that kind of experience with that area. But quick question: do you think it changes, Candid, in terms of the strategies or the frameworks, depending on how big the size of the company is or how far ahead it is in its journey? I'd say the latter is probably, if you're collecting more data, of course, the strategies and the areas are going to change. But does the key things that you need to watch or monitor, does it change significantly or not when you're looking at, say, a large publicly traded company compared to a local startup that's got a handful of customers?
I'd say there's some small differences for sure,
Yeah.
because smaller companies might not use the whole same kind of software and yeah, tools behind it, right?
Yeah.
Talking about ERP solutions or even just the HR solution. If
Yeah.
you're a 10 people company, you might still do it on an Excel sheet. You probably shouldn't, but you might use kind of smaller scale systems.
Yeah.
But I think in general, yes, it's the same thing, specifically if you talk about data protection, about cybersecurity,
Yeah.
because basically you want to find the outliers. So very much it's anomaly detection, right? You want to know, is Candid logging in at 2 o'clock on a Saturday morning
Yeah.
from, I don't know, an IP address in South Korea?
Yeah.
Unlikely, maybe I'm on vacation there, right? But those are the things that you might want to check and then say, hey, can we do some additional checks? And that's where, on one end, you can go towards zero trust, right? Saying, okay, I allow Candy to get in, but I'm not giving him full access to all the customer data.
Yeah.
Maybe he just needs to check the calendar. That's fine, right? So kind of do some segmentation and compartmentalization of the data itself.
Yeah. That's a great way. That's a great way of thinking. Thank you, Candid. And we actually had someone just mention that. So, Dr. Mohammed, he's come in and said cyber research could deeply support governments and sustainability procedures, which is an interesting topic because I don't know what you think on that, Candid, but it's an area that sometimes gets missed, and people can instantly look at the more commercial routes, I guess, or not the necessarily the overlaying governance and procedures that you need to help. So, any thinking on that of how cyber research is going in that area at the moment?
I fully agree with Dr. Mohammed there. I mean, it's a great area that definitely is overlooked in many cases.
Yeah,
Probably it's not as sexy as other things, but
yeah,
yes, it can help you with staying compliant, for example,
yeah,
knowing where your data is. Right, privacy laws are growing more and more, and there's fines if you don't adhere to it. So it's
yeah,
definitely good to know where your data is and how it is treated. Uh,
yeah,
and I think we will see it even more. Just take one step further, right, and think about smart cities
yeah.
or all the IoT devices out there, right?
That's what I was
There's
going
more
to
and
come on
more.
to next. I was thinking, I was like, with all this like the public law and everything. But yeah, please continue. Yeah,
Yeah, exactly. I mean, there's so many new things, and they're generating data, right?
yeah,
So the question is what to do with that data, and of course, it's always a fine line. As in surveillance on one side, but kind of interesting analysis on the other. But
yeah,
there's definitely good things that you can do with those informations and probably should be done as well. But yeah,
yeah,
data governance and other kind of compliance checks
yeah.
should absolutely not be overlooked. I agree.
Yeah, really interesting point and point that's as it get overlooked. But I think looking at it from IoT and smart cities and connected cities and all these devices coming out, I think, and I don't agree with the way that they do it, but over in China, you can see how, and there's a great series on YouTube, and it's about the investment in China and just how quickly they're growing, and it uses all these different sources of data from how much concrete they're using compared to the concrete used in America, and they've used like 5 times the amount in a fraction of the time, and it's ridiculous just to show how quickly they're building and putting up infrastructure, but how kind of actually forward thinking they are and how much arguably, yes, one side invasion of privacy to a degree, but also how much safer and how much better it is as a kind of experience. Like you can have a shop like you're seeing Amazon Fresh. I was in London the other day and the taxi drove past it and I was like just saw the tag on it like no card needed or something. And it's crazy to think these things are coming to us in a very cool way. Is there any best practices, or maybe is there do you see anything with the threat landscape? And I know you've just touched on it, so might not have much more to add, but I think it's just mind blowing on how it's going to open up all these new opportunities. But then, as you said, all these security issues are just going to be soon right following it. What do you think, Candid?
Yeah, I mean, I'm a huge fan as well of all those, let's say, opportunities there with smart devices and
Yeah,
so on. But yes, on the other hand, it also opens up a lot of opportunities for the attackers, unfortunately.
yeah,
About, I think that's now 7 years ago, I bought my first smart TV at home.
yeah.
And just to prove the point, I did a proof of concept to infect it with ransomware.
I love it.
And unfortunately, it worked, right? It took me one weekend and I had it working.
Yeah,
And afterwards, I thought, hey, it's actually pretty bad because if you think that would happen at, let's say, one of a Champions League Masters game
yeah,
or a final Super Bowl, people would definitely be probably willing to pay something. And I'm not enticing anyone to do it, right? It's unethical. Don't do it. But
mm,
it definitely would work, right? And then the second question is, how do you get rid of it? Because you don't really run any security software on your smart device. I mean,
yeah,
on the TV you could, but do you really want to run one on your fridge, on your smart kettle, and everything? Probably not, because that will slow it down as well.
yeah,
So you need to go a different avenue and either protect the device by design, which
yeah,
unfortunately have failed for many, many years, or
yeah,
try to go through the network, which is getting more and more complex because network connectivity is encrypted. So you
yeah,
don't really know what's going on.
yeah,
And this is definitely a real challenge that we see. And to give you another example, there has been, and this is a few years back as well, a major attack against a casino in Las Vegas.
yeah.
And the attackers actually breached the casino through the thermostat of the fish tank
Really?
because The
Ah,
fish tank had one of those fancy thermostats, so
yeah.
it was connected to the internet. And unfortunately, the thermostat was also on the same internal network than the rest of the casino. So from the
Wow.
fish tank, they were able to jump over to the high stakes poker tables and get the private addresses of peoples and so on.
Yeah.
So it's now the question, right? Do you want to have a separate network for all your smart devices?
Yeah.
That might work in some instances, but in others, you actually want to have the connectivity because you want to stream some media from your laptop to the TV, right? So
Yeah.
yes,
Fine
it's
line.
something that we definitely need to keep in mind. And of course, machine learning and AI can help you with that as well.
Yeah.
Even if it's encrypted traffic in the network, we've seen some promising tests where you can just get the communication pattern, right? And say, hey, your kettle has never talked to your fridge, but suddenly it's sending a lot of data. So probably either they're colluding against you or something else fishy is going on. So you should stop it right now.
Yeah. It's incredible how you can get from something like a thermostat. That's really crazy to thinking you can get to some high playing people that definitely don't want their information shared, and all of a sudden you've got to it for a fish tank. It's almost incomprehensible to think that's how it works, but it's definitely something to be alert for people watching. And I think it's a great way to look at it as well. Where do you kind of see it then, like the best practices in cyber with AI being used and how it can help with those areas and how it can stop? Because I think it's very interesting, and this is a point I want to just say. No matter how advanced we become, Candid, and I don't know if you agree, I always think even when we were less advanced. I mean, have you ever watched the film Catch Me If You Can?
Sure.
With Leonardo DiCaprio playing Frank Abagnale, and Frank Abagnale has done some brilliant talks at Google and some universities, and you can find a wealth of them on YouTube. But I think he was hired by the government or by the FBI or whatever it was to come and find the other people. That's where his plea was to basically all the fraud he'd committed to get a lower sentence. And now he's like very top senior in understanding where fraudulent people are. I think no matter how advanced we become, the human in the loop is going to become an important aspect. But I do think things like AI and having the best practices are going to help in cyber, no matter how advanced we become, because something like that, it was still very traditional the way he was doing it, writing paper checks. Everything now is electronic. I mean, there's a lot of times I don't even go out my wallet. I just got Apple Pay on my phone and just done. There you go. So what do you think on that, Candid?
I definitely agree that yes, the expert is definitely important, specifically as the models we're building now for AI, they're
Yeah,
usually built on data from yesterday or
yeah,
near yesterday, but we want to protect against the attacks of tomorrow, right? So they might work very well on the things that we know, but that's kind of the old conundrum that we have. If we now introduce something like 5G and we
yeah,
haven't really trained our AI on those new technologies, we might not be able to detect it. And that's where the expert then comes in again. And you're basically trying to catch up and minimize that time gap. And of course, get rid of the old things.
yeah,
But the second point to make is not everyone can afford to have a Frank Abagnale working for them, right? So I think that's where you need the expert in a box. So
yeah,
getting an expert system where some experts like Frank might be able to teach and kind of build that into a model, an AI model, which can
yeah,
then be applied even for your local shop down the road to basically have the same quality and same security because now they can use the same system. And I think
yeah,
that's where we need to go because, as I mentioned, most of the people don't have enough resources or even the knowledge to actually fight those things.
yeah,
I always compare it maybe 15 years ago, kind of the first days of personal firewalls on laptops. You always had kind of pop-ups coming and say, hey, SVC host wants to go to the internet. Do you want to allow it? Yes or no?
yeah,
And I mean, even for me as an expert, it was always I don't really know because there's not enough information, right? How should a normal user know about those decisions? They cannot, right? So we
yeah,
need to not ask them and bombard them with things, but actually decide for them and only kind of ask if there is really something where we need the expert information from their end, but
yeah,
then we need to explain. So maybe go into white box AI as well. So make AI explainable. It's not just saying, oh, this file is bad, but actually telling, hey, it's bad because it looks like a ransomware and I've seen it kind of similar to that and that, helping you to understand the decision. Because otherwise, nobody really likes a black box, right? And then suddenly we drift into the distrust where people say, I don't want that system because it's blocking one transaction and I think it was a good one, so I'm not trusting it anymore.
Yeah. Very important point to notice as well, and to really consider. So I guess that brings us nicely into my final question, Candid, which is, where do you see the future of the industry going with all the points you just made just then, and with new technologies? How do you think you see it changing from a personal point of view, and perhaps from what you're seeing from a wider team view at Acronis?
I think it's definitely true that we will see some interesting changes in the next 2 to 3 years.
Yeah.
And this is unfortunately on both ends, so on defense, but also offensive side. So we already seen that attackers have started to use AI and machine learning as well.
Yeah.
It's a bit harder to prove because usually you don't really see their tools unless some of them get raided or some data has been leaked. But for example, we've seen for phishing attacks that they use a lot of personalized information from data breaches, so that you will receive an email, as you said, from your local bank, and it really is your bank, and it will say, hey, Tom, there has been a fraudulent transaction, please click here.
Yeah.
You have to do it in 24 hours or your account will be blocked, right? Kind of the usual urgency, but it's a lot more convincing because it's your name, you have an existing connection.
Yeah.
And now the machine learning will actually count how many people fall for it and click it. And then they will boost their own kind of reinforced learning, saying, oh, the bank model worked, but the parcel delivery did not really work. So I'll shift my template automatically to the new theme. So this is already happening, which is, of course, scary because that makes it even harder to detect.
Yeah.
And the second one we see is adversarial AI. So attackers started to know, okay, the AI and machine learning model are actually deployed onto an end system in many cases, right? Which means you can reverse engineer it and analyze it. And maybe you find out, oh, it's very good system, but if I put my malware with those 2 French words, it will think it's legitimate and just bypass everything. And this actually happened with one security company. Someone analyzed it and saw, hey, they're having some issue with a popular gaming client, Fortnite.
Yeah.
And if you take a few of the strings, so the readable characters from that gaming client, and just add it at the end of your malware, you can just bypass it and it will no longer be detected. And they proved it with WannaCry, Stuxnet, and a few of the big cases that now they have a binary which is no longer detected.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's kind of the cat and mouse game, right? Because you need to develop a model which you can deploy, but you also need to protect it, that it's not so easy for the attackers to figure out what you're trying to do, right?
Yeah.
So there's a lot of changes there, but there are some ways to do this, right? With hybrid models, of course, with encryption on top of it, some neural networks where it's not so easy anymore to trace what is happening. So this is something that we definitely see coming. And the other way, as you said, is just about being more efficient and reducing the complexity. So at Acronis, we definitely focusing on that, making it as automated, as quick as possible, without, as I said, asking you too many questions that you probably don't know the answer either. So we try to make your life as easy as possible so that you can focus on your core things without worrying, is my data secure? Will I survive the next cyber attack? And so on.
Yeah, I love that. It's so important, because if you are someone that looks that way of thinking, well, how can we get you to focus on your strong areas? And I always think, if I can outsource and take someone that's going to spend years of like yourself, Candid, you've got the experience from your own personal hobbies, and if I can bring someone like you to the table, it's much easier, rather than trying to develop it in-house and trying to guess and trying to do all these things and trying to look at all of it, where you know where to look and where to find it and how to make it as smooth as possible. So I think it's really awesome to see what you and the team are doing. So we do have one question. We've got it's very generic question, but answer it how you see fit, Candid, if that's okay. You okay to answer one question?
Go ahead. Yeah.
Can cyber attacks be avoided, or are they inevitable? Are they inevitable? Me personally, I would say they're inevitable, depending on reason. But I'd say they can be avoided at the same time. I'd be in a catch-22 situation. Is it? Yes, no. I'll be half and half. What do you think?
Yeah, I would say you can avoid some, but they're there. I mean, it's the question how much you want to expose yourself as well, right? If you're living offline on a small island, probably you're not too much exposed and it's not really happening too much for you. But let's say in our Western world, where you're using exactly your smartphone to pay on things, you shop online,
Yeah,
you watch nice videos, you are exposed to some things.
yeah,
So there is a catch. You can definitely do a lot to minimize your risk, right? As I
yeah,
mentioned, make sure that you're not exposing services that you don't really need. So if you don't need remote access to your laptop, maybe shut down remote desktop protocol or any other remote systems that you might have.
yeah,
Make sure that you have strong passwords and even use multi-factor authentication on your systems. And many systems nowadays allow you as well to get a notification if a new IP address connects to it, right? So at
yeah,
least you know something is going on.
yeah,
And I'd say always be vigilant, right? Because many of the cases, it is an email that you receive, again, from a bank, parcel delivery or something. And because you're under stress or somewhere in the tube reading it in the morning while you're still waking up, you
yeah.
might click on it and reveal some information. And
Lovely.
this can really be avoided by just think before you click, wait a little bit and think, did I really play the Spanish lottery
Yeah,
and now won 2 billion? Probably not, right? So they don't need any information from my end.
yeah,
I know it's always tempting, right? If there's money involved and some people say, hey, I owe you money, just give me your bank account and I'll send it. But
yeah,
there is no free lunch, right? So usually there's always a catch. So think twice about revealing information, even if you think, oh, it's just my post address. What could possibly go wrong, right? But
yeah,
that can be information that they then use in a secondary attack. Maybe they call up your internet provider and say, oh, I have some outage here, but my name is this and this is my address. Can you please give me a password now on the phone?
mm,
I have seen that that works, right? And now they're in your email account, then they're resetting your credit card statements, and that's kind of how the chain starts.
yeah,
So
that's,
not really avoidable, but you can minimize the risk,
yeah,
and yeah, hopefully then stay ahead of it that you don't have any impact. So we usually call that staying cyber fit.
yeah.
So like in real world, right? You should go to the gym or do some exercise. You have to stay fit in the cyberspace as well.
Yeah. And keep yourself prepared. I think that's the key thing because I look at the pandemic for as an example, as horrible as it was. Bill Gates did a TED talk in 2017, 2016, and he said, one's coming. He was like, pandemic is coming, and we don't seem to care. But he's like, this is going to be disastrous. And you can see him on stage, like, this is what we can do to prepare. And sure enough, 5 years later, however long it was, I think it was about 2016, 2017, he did it. But now it's happened, as horrible as it was. If it happens again, which they reckon it will do in a much shorter time span because of how the world's adapting, we'll be a lot more prepared. And I think even if you can't avoid it or it's inevitable, you're going to be much more prepared. And if you're in the know and if you're using companies like Acronis, you're going to have the best preparation and the best. And that's the way I would look at it because I think it's although certain things in life are unavoidable, you can always be the best prepared for them. So when the mistake does happen or something does happen that you didn't see, you'll be much more prepared for it next time, which I think is a great point and what we're
Mhm.
kind of alluding to, Candid. We have
Yeah,
one more question. Sorry, go on.
actually, I agree on that. Yeah, kind of lessen the impact, right? If I go back to my analogy with the car,
Yeah,
you can say, "Hey, I'm a perfect driver. I'm never gonna make an accident, right?" And disable your airbag, not using seatbelt and everything. There's still a risk that someone drives into you, right? So no matter
yeah,
how well you think you're protected, you should take those precautions because it may happen, and you want to lessen the impact. Absolutely.
exactly. And to learn from it, that's the biggest thing. It's what we're passionate about the AI Journal to learn. And we've got one other question that's come through. So this one is a bit of an interesting one from Eric. Thank you, Eric. Do you think AI is a threat or can, to a large extent, replace human involvement? So I would love to hear what you think. I don't see AI as a threat. I see it as an enabler and as a positive area. But what do you think, Candid?
Well, on the first part, I'm not sure threat to what, right? As in threat to your own job security or threat to humanity, as in Skynet. But let's start with the second part. I agree. I don't see it in the near future to be a full replacement for human kind of involvement, right? As I said,
Yeah,
there will still be expert knowledge needed to retrain it for new things.
yeah,
Um, Also, I mean, we're getting good at niche and kind of small AI fields. but we don't really have the general AI yet, right? And it probably will take a few more years as well. So it can help speed up things, help define and find kind of outliers, even on unstructured data, unsupervised learning. But I mean, if you go back, right, you can protect your laptop very easily from email attacks, but then suddenly you have someone mailing you a USB stick with a malware, and you receive it, you plug it in, and suddenly that's something that you haven't thought of, so your AI might not detect it, right? There's always a few avenues that you have dropped, but people are used to. So I think that seeing it as a threat, as I said, I'm not really sure which direction it goes, but I don't see it as a threat. I see it as an opportunity, as I said, that you can get back to your core things, being it making sense of the data, use it to be better service to your customers, sleeping better at night because you know your data is guarded. So I think it's definitely an opportunity, but it's not the silver bullet which will solve all of the things, at least not for the next 3 years.
It's not like you can just go buy it from a vendor and say, I've got AI, I'm protected. Like, it's just, that's that, I'm done. Like, it's
exactly.
a good point to know. But I really appreciated your time today. If anyone has any questions that come through, we'll try and get to them after this show. But Candid, really, really grateful for your time today to share it with our audience and the people watching live and recorded. And where can people find out more about you, more about Acronis, and any questions they might have after this, please?
I think the easiest is just hit us up on the internet, www.acronis.com, right? There you find all the information about the products I talked to. You find educational videos as well. So we try to share the information. And of course, you can reach out to us as well. You can have trial accounts on the different softwares if you're interested, or read some of the blogs from me and my teams. And of course, you can find me on LinkedIn as well. So Candid West. There's not that many candidates, so you should be able to find me. And would love to answer any questions that might come up after you watch the video.
Yeah, looking forward to it. It'll be it's a really interesting thing, and I always love doing these because I get to learn a lot, and you really open my eyes up to a lot of situations in where cybersecurity and cyber protection is such a important part, and not just looking at it from a cyber, but the kind of ways it can affect other areas that you don't even first think about, that you think wouldn't have any kind of impact. So real thank you for all the lessons, and look forward to hopefully doing another one with you again in the future, Candid.
Thanks for having me. And absolutely, yes. Stay cyber fit, and till next time.
Cheers. Thank you. And thank you to everyone who's tuned in today. Really appreciate it. As again, if you need anything, drop a comment in the video and reach out to us. We're always looking to interview amazing people from amazing companies around the world to help our audience and educate our audience. And really appreciate you taking the time today. Until next time, we'll see you on the next LinkedIn Live. Thank you, and have a great afternoon or great morning wherever you are in the world. Thank you.